Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to give you an INTJ take on MBTI INTJ Personality Projections. If you haven't watched my Processes overview video yet, I would recommend viewing it as an introduction to this video. I will also serve as an introduction to the other videos I will be creating on all 16 personality types. I'll put a link in the description below. According to the MBTI, every person has 4 cognitive functions. These functions help us to relate to the universe we live in. Reality is out there, and we are inside our heads working to make some sort of sense of it all. The 4 functions are split into 2 categories: perceiving and judging. When we perceive, we are taking in information and making sense of it. When we are judging, we use our judgment to make decisions about what we have perceived. The perceiving cognitive functions are intuition and sensing, which I described in the aforementioned video, along with the judging cognitive functions of thinking and feeling. The human mind naturally will select one preferred method for perceiving and another one for judging. This will therefore relegate the other 2 functions to a secondary status. The 2 primary cognitive functions are called the dominant and auxiliary functions, and the 2 secondary functions are called the tertiary and the inferior. A rather odd feature of this process is that either a perceiving or a judging feature can be dominant. It makes for some interesting combinations in different personality types. The human mind automatically turns the lion's share of the load over to the dominant function, and it works closely with the auxiliary function in this process. The other 2 functions can join in the mix in odd ways, and at times the tertiary function and inferior function can take the lead in what goes on inside your head. Since these lesser functions are not as well developed, it can lead to results that are less under control. This can be troubling at times. For balance, the dominant and the inferior functions are always the same type, either perceiving or judging. They are like the opposite poles of a magnet, but they are not equal. The dominant function is grown up and sophisticated when compared with the inferior function. It is strong and polished up and ready to go to work. The inferior function can take over, though, the same way a baby can take over any situation in a family when it starts crying for attention. For the INTJ, the functions are stacked as perceiving, judging, judging, perceiving, for the dominant, auxiliary, tertiary, and inferior functions respectively. The I at the start of INTJ tells you that the leading function will be introverted, and the J at the end tells you that the extroverted function will be a judging one. The N is for intuition, and that is a perceiving function. The T is for thinking, which is a judging function. So we lead with the perceiving function, introverted intuition, and our auxiliary function is extroverted thinking. As I said, the tertiary function is of the same type as the auxiliary, and that means it will be feeling, which is the other judging function. However, another factor of the mind organization is that whatever orientation, either introverted or extroverted, that the auxiliary function is, the tertiary function will be the opposite one. This is also true of the dominant and inferior functions. So, the auxiliary function is introverted feeling, and that leaves extroverted sensing as the inferior perceiving function. I described the characteristics of all these cognitive functions in my overview video, and so I won't repeat myself here. What I want to look at is the way that these functions work with each other for an INTJ. What does this organization tell us about the INTJ mind and how it will project into the outside world? Our preference level for each of the cognitive functions will determine how we will prefer to approach any input or event and the types of actions that our mind will then tend to create. I'm going to quickly run through some pictures of yours truly in order to show how this particular INTJ appeared at different stages of development. This first picture was taken of me when I was 6, and it was during the school year 1957-58. The eyes are alert, but not what you would call cheery. I didn't have a big smile, even though I am sure the photographer had said cheese or something else to get me to smile. I was no longer in the controlled environment of home. I was in a room with more than 30 other kids, and my only anchor was the structure that the teacher laid down. Going to school was like moving to a foreign country for me and trying to work out the rules. The teacher was nice, but I could make no sense at all of the social interaction going on with the other kids. My primary goal was to stay out of the way of the others and to be left alone. I had a couple of friends, but they were never the popular ones. They were always outside the extroverted center of the class. I can't remember a time when I actually yearned to be in the middle of all that popularity energy that seemed to percolate throughout the children in the class. The only time I had strong feelings about that was when the ones in the center of the little solar system of the group turned their scorn in my direction. Over time, I learned how to remain on the periphery of the class and to be left alone most of the time. Unfortunately, the teacher usually was tuned into the center of the class, and I was often ignored by her as well. School was more of a challenge of learning to deal with other people than a place to be educated on subjects in a curriculum. It was a very odd mix of boredom and terror, with many possible ways for bad things to happen. And other than playing sports, I didn't enjoy grade school very much. Now compare the eyes in my first grade picture to the eyes in this next picture. The face has matured and grown into more adult proportions, and so the eyes are smaller relative to the size of my face. The camera was placed right in front of me, and in first grade I had to look up a bit. However, in both photos my eyes were not smiling, and they were very much present in the moment. I was in a situation I really didn't care for, and I was dealing with it. This is an example of what is called the INTJ death stare. It is a picture of me from my high school annual when I was in the 11th grade, a junior. It looks like I was angry, doesn't it? Or trying to look tough. I was never a tough or bullying type of kid in school. I hated that type of person. Neither was I angry. I was switched off to the world and sitting in front of a camera because I had to be, and I was waiting for it to be over. I turned 18 the coming summer, before I started my senior year of high school. I crossed the threshold this year where life changed forever for me. The school was a boarding school, and everyone had to not only attend classes and get his schoolwork done, but we all had a job to do as well. My job that year was grading papers for the math teacher. I was taking Algebra 2 and trigonometry, and so my job was to grade all the homework papers turned in by those in my class and the two classes below us, Geometry and Algebra 1. The teacher would first grade my homework submission, and any errors he would mark in red, and then I used that as my grading example for the others in that class. I had an example for the correct work for each of the three classes, and I spent the afternoon grading all the homework. It was a fun job for an INTJ. I interfaced with the teacher and no one else, engaged my brain, and honed my skills in math and sometimes interpreting the hieroglyphics that was the handwriting of the other students. I made the school team that year for basketball and enjoyed all the sports the school offered, but my circle of friends was small. The one area where I socialized openly was when I could take my guitar into a public place and sing, either with or for others. This was the year that I finally broke the ice with the girls a bit, and in fact it was the year I met my first wife and we started dating. If you check the eyes in my senior picture against the ones in my junior picture, you will see that they really are the same. I was posed to look off to one side and was asked to smile. The smile almost looks like a sneer, but it wasn't. I was trying to smile. I was focused slightly above the camera horizon line, but the eyes are still not really smiling. Since I was a senior that year, I got a color version of my school picture, and you can see I was decked out in a color to match my eyes, with everything being blue. The next picture was taken 16 years later in 1986. I was the leading petty officer of the Communications Division on a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier. The eyes are looking directly into the camera, as they were with my junior picture, and they have a sense of almost mischievous humor at the situation. I was ordered to pose for this picture because I wanted to skip having it taken, but the entire ship's crew was going to be in the cruise book at the end of our 7-month cruise, and the division officer said he wanted my picture in the book. My smile is still pulled to one side, and the nearly 30 years that had passed between my first grade picture and this one hadn't changed the fact that this world was filled with mysteries to be discovered, and I was engaged in trying to puzzle things out. While looking slightly mischievous, my eyes were not happy or sad. They were doors behind which my emotions were hidden. Through the years, I was the same INTJ year after year. Life had been a stormy sea at times, and I had weathered some tragedies by this time. My father had been dead for nearly 15 years. My first wife had left me 12 years earlier, taking our son with her, and it took many years before I finally got custody of him. On the upside, I met my soulmate, and we had been married 10 years when this picture was taken. Our son had been born 9 years earlier, and my oldest boy was now living with us. The years changed me in many ways, but it never reached inside and changed who I was at the core. At all points along the way, I was searching for answers while finding a great deal that was confusing. All the personality types that have intuition and thinking at the top of their stack are called the rationals. Along with INTJ, you will find the INTP, the ENTP, and the ENTJ. Does that mean that all the other types are irrationals? There are times. Actually, the intent of classifying us as rationals is not to slight the other types for lacking something. It is rather to highlight the fact that we are focused on rationality, and it is at the center of our cognitive approach to life. The INTJ has been called the mastermind, and also the scientist and even the architect. We are all those things, but I like to think of us as the masters of the mind, not so much as an accomplished fact, but as a goal to strive for. I want to master my mind, fill it, organize it, and then understand everything I have stored there. It is an impossible dream, but with the impossibility of the dream comes the perpetual nature of the drive. I can't stop moving towards my goal, even if I know I will never reach it. It may be an end of the rainbow I am looking for, but it is a quest that feels right and brings me pleasure. Every mind has the same 4 cognitive functions, but the hierarchy into which these functions are placed varies from type to type. This chain of command arrangement is not like a king ruling over his subjects. It is more like a traditional family. The dominant function is like the father, the auxiliary function is like the mother, the tertiary is like a preteen big brother, and the inferior is like the preschool kid sister. Mom and dad work together as a team. They are opposite types, with one being perceiving and the other being judging. The brother is the same basic type as mother, and the sister is the same type as dad. While this analogy is not perfect, it carries the idea pretty well. In a traditional family, the husband is the head of the household. This is like the dominant function in the human mind. For an INTJ, this is intuition. However, in the traditional family, the head of the household works hand in glove with his partner and companion. They are a team, and there are no single-parent families in the world of cognitive functions. Traditionally, for most major events in life, the dominant function jumps right in and takes the lead. But in the mind, just like in a functional family, dad works with mom to come to a decision about what will be done. Intuition works hand in glove with thinking for all the rational MBTI types. In the INTJ, intuition is dominant, and it is pretty cool because it is always working in the background, even when it is not pulled into the foreground of whatever is going on at the moment. In some families, dad is the thinker and mom is the driving force to get things done. Sometimes the roles are reversed. In the same way, for half or 8 of the personality types, the dominant function is a perceiving one, while the auxiliary function is a judging function. For the rest of them, judging is dominant and perceiving is auxiliary. In any case, the wife in a traditional family works in concert with her husband. Decisions require both of the parties to be involved. They are an inseparable team, and they have the same basic goals at heart. Our intuition is married together with our thinking to form a team, and this team will do the heavy lifting for our mind in most cases. When an INTJ is looking through you with his death stare, he is usually locked into a loop between his dominant introverted intuition and his extroverted thinking. They are talking things over inside his head. They are analyzing possibilities and coming to conclusions and finding new ideas that might apply. And again, they are analyzed and compared with existing patterns and back and forth. I have been locked inside such a loop many times for hours, and later been surprised when I finally checked the time. Far more time had passed than I had noticed going by. It is a wonderful place to be, a sort of Disneyland for the INTJ mind. My ESTP wife has told me more times than I can count that there is never a good time to interrupt my thinking, because I'm always working on something inside my head. But the results from this process still will surprise her. She will mention something that she just read or saw, and she thought it was shocking, and I would then fill in the details that I had learned or worked out years before. She often looks at me and says, "You know everything." And she isn't joking. In fact, she sometimes finds it irritating because she wanted to share something new with me and it wasn't new to me. This illusion of omniscience, and no one knows better than I that it is just an illusion, can create tension at a deep level. Other people sometimes think that an INTJ is not human or is a computing robot. It can put up walls. What do you do when somebody you really care about tells you that you are too smart? This is just one more aspect of social interactions that can be difficult for an INTJ. This marriage between introverted intuition and extroverted thinking is the workhorse team that pulls most of the mental load for the INTJ, but there are two other functions. Consider the traditional family once again and picture a son who is preteen and a little sister who is preschool. The son represents the tertiary cognitive function or introverted feeling for INTJs. He has an input into the family as well, and he can range from being seen but not heard to pitching a fit that takes over the show. Feelings can be quite troubling to an INTJ. It is easy for someone inside his inner circle to hurt the feelings of an INTJ because he is not a social expert. Completely without intention, something can be said that feels like a red-hot poker has been shoved into my heart. My wife is a bubbly ESTP who has a bit of a bipolar condition. It is fortunately not an extreme case, but when she gets into her manic speed-talking mode, and sometimes I find myself hurt by something she said. She is in my innermost circle, and only she is in a position to do that to me. Most people's opinions are of little concern to me, and if a dullard says something rude, I just walk away. It is not an easy direct path from the outside to reach the tertiary function inside my head. My introverted feeling function is less mature and less well developed. So when my feelings get into the game and start controlling things, I can overreact, at least in the inside. Outside, the projection is one of the enhanced death stare, up to the point where I get truly angry. My initial reaction is to clam up and clamp down when I'm angry or hurt. My wife is an expert at reading my face, telling the difference between my normal death stare when I'm caught up in thought and the angry stare. I think mostly my eyes tend to squint down tighter when I'm angry, but she knows it. When I do it to strangers or acquaintances, she later accuses me of being rude, even though I never said a word. She knows that I am angry and am thinking thoughts that might blister the paint off the walls if I express them, but most of the time the other party goes on in blissful ignorance of the temper tantrum my little preteen feelings are having. On the rare occasion that I trip past the internal enhancement death stare and actually outwardly projecting my thoughts, I can be extremely rude and cutting. An example comes to mind. My wife had gone to an optometrist in order to buy a pair of bifocal glasses based upon a new prescription. When the glasses arrived, she tried them on, and the dividing line for the lens was in the wrong place. The optometrist adjusted the glasses, but they were still not right. The lady grew insistent that my wife was simply wrong. It reached the point where it appeared she was trying to force my wife to accept the glasses that just wouldn't work. I was growing more and more angry as this went on. I have a low tolerance for stupidity and ignorance in those who have moved into pontification mode. Those who have been educated beyond their capacity to utilize what they have learned are a particularly irritating subset of college graduates. When I get angry enough to actually step into a conversation as the one that was going on between my wife and her optometrist, quiet time is over. I have passed right on by the point where I suffer fools gladly. I told the optometrist that the glasses just wouldn't do, and she needed to accept that fact. She came back with the worst possible answer. Well, I have a degree in optometry and I know what I am talking about. I told her, I don't care how many degrees you have, you are bloody wrong. These glasses have the line in the wrong place. When I reach this point in a conversation, my voice level rises greatly. I don't even realize it's happening. I feel like I am instructing a child and the child needs to hear me. Well, the end result of this exchange was that I was asked to leave the premises. And my wife, who had not seen me get that angry in a public place very often, told me that that was probably a good idea, and she would handle it from here. Now, my wife is no shrinking violet, and I have seen her put on a very loud show herself any number of times with businesses who are not treating her correctly. But ladies are less likely to get tossed out. She got the glasses problem resolved to her satisfaction. But even after the years have gone by, to this day she still talks about me getting thrown out of the glasses store. While the dominant and auxiliary functions can create an internal marriage between soulmates, the kids in the family can play together as well. When I quit smoking in 1998, it was by far the hardest thing I have ever done. My extroverted sensing was a huge part of that, and the way that nicotine can affect my feelings was also part of it. The two kid functions in my head were strongly influenced by my smoking habit, and they pitched a real fit when I gave it up. They were running wild for a time, and I was eating anything that was in front of me, and I slapped on 50 pounds. I fell off the wagon more times than I can count, and I had quit in 1990 for 5 years and then started back up again. I didn't finally put the problem to bed until May of 1998. I haven't had a smoke since then, but I still want one. They talk about a dry drunk. Well, I'm a non-smoking smoker in the same way. These two kid functions get involved with my love of sports, hiking in nature, and other areas of life not related to taking in knowledge and processing it. Thinking is what I do most, and I do best, but I love some physical things as well. Also, I have found that writing fiction can unleash my childlike introverted feelings. I have literally had tears running down my face when writing a scene with a character that I have grown very attached to who is suffering. It seems crazy to me because this character only exists inside my own head, and I am in distress over this non-existent person's suffering. Concerning this extroverted sensing and introverted feeling loop, I can also laugh uncontrollably given the right circumstances. About the time that this Navy picture was taken, I was several months into my last Navy cruise. We were in the Mediterranean Sea, and the cruise was going on and on. We crossed the line of death that Muammar Gaddafi had set in the waters off Libya, and we had passed the date when our cruise was supposed to end. But Lebanon had something happen, and we turned around near Spain and headed back to the east. I was to the point where I was feeling very down and ready to hold my wife in my arms again and to hug my sons. As it turned out, that very night when I was feeling so bad, the ship showed a movie on the closed-circuit TV system. It was from the Armed Forces Radio and Television Service, and I had a space on the ship where I was alone, and there was a TV there which was hooked up to the system. Most of the guys who were watching TV were in the electronics shop, where they could enjoy the other technicians' company as they were being entertained. Being an INTJ, I was far happier to be alone as I watched the movie. As it turned out, the movie, which I had never even heard of before, was as good a cure for my blues as anything short of being with my wife could have been. From the very start, ruthless people got me laughing. For 2 hours I laughed almost constantly. The movie is well done, but even so, it was just a catalyst. It wasn't the root cause of my released emotions. I was carrying a load of these emotions from the months at sea. Being able to laugh that night and releasing the stress helped me a great deal over the coming weeks. When my ship finally tied up at the pier, my wife was there to meet me, and she was the most beautiful sight I had ever seen. She flew into my arms when I came off the gangway. She, like me, was eager for this reunion. I was impressed by her eagerness when we saw a video clip on the nightly news, and there she was when they opened the gate to the pier, leading the crowd of wives and girlfriends pouring through. She had to run to keep from being trampled. While happy to see me, she told me that she was horrified when she saw how thin I was. I looked like a skeleton because I hadn't eaten very much and was running up and down 14 levels on the ship almost every day. Going up and down those ladders is amazing exercise. And being an introvert, I didn't like waiting in chow lines to get my food, so I skipped a lot of meals. That night we got a friend to watch the kids for us, and we checked into a motel. We will never forget that night. Aside from the predictable pleasures we experienced, even the time on the balcony for our room was wonderful. We were looking down on the Atlantic waves crashing in on the rocks as a February storm whipped the sea into wild fury. We snuggled together on a bench, wrapped in a warm blanket, holding on to each other as the wind blew into our smiling faces. If heaven isn't a lot like that night was for us, it's overrated. An INTJ can get lost in music or playing sports. We can do many things besides running our dominant auxiliary functions through their workouts. But we do tend to focus on that mental processing of information, making sense of things around us. Just like the traditional families through the many years, there are numerous combinations possible. Things get complicated, and even when two people have the same personality type, he will have his own take on life and how to present himself. For example, Mr. Henry F. Potter was a fictional character in the movie It's a Wonderful Life. He was an INTJ. He was evil and selfish, and he didn't care if he destroyed people's lives around him. He was a thief and happy to be so. He looked like a smile would shatter his face. Ebenezer Scrooge, as I pointed out in another video, was an INTJ who, while not intentionally evil, simply disconnected from people. Perry Mason, who in one of the books of the series asked Della Street to marry him, but she declined, was an INTJ idealist who was truly a mastermind in the courtroom. If you are old enough to remember, or have used YouTube to catch up on the past, William F. Buckley Jr. was a classic example of the delivery of an INTJ. He paused, thought a bit, spoke part of the thought, and then hesitated before finishing it. He thought deeply and spoke softly. One of my favorite INTJ authors is Isaac Asimov. I've read his original Foundation trilogy many times, and his Lige Bailey stories as well, like The Caves of Steel and The Naked Sun. From Batman to Gandalf, from Emperor Palpatine to Mr. Spock, the world of fiction is loaded up with INTJ characters. I tend to relate to people who are INTJs, not surprisingly, and that is why I enjoy Nietzsche, Plato's depiction of Socrates, Christopher Hitchens, and Elon Musk. There are INTJs I don't care for at all, of course. For example, I feel the most evil man who ever existed was Karl Marx, based upon body count and the number of tyrannical governments that sprang from his ideas. However, the INTJ logical approach is understandable, even when the starting point is erroneously based upon faulty premises. And just think of the music of Beethoven. How can anyone listen to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and not be overwhelmed by the majesty and the power of that piece? Bobby Fischer was perhaps the best chess player who ever lived. Arnold Schwarzenegger showed us what a weight room was for. Oral Hershiser showed us how to use intellect to analyze the profession of pitching and to use that to produce incredible results. Even though we don't care for social interaction that much, some INTJs have taken that on as a challenge and gone pro with it. Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase have shown that INTJs can be funny. Russell Crowe has shown that they can also be superb actors. INTJs have been involved with, or actually at the heart of, most of the technology you see around you. I have felt all along that INTJs are not generally at all interested in ruling the world. We are interested in ruling our own minds and understanding the world. We think of new ways things can be done, and sometimes we run with that and actually do it. Other times we have an aha moment, knowing that something will work, and then move on to another topic entirely. We are athletes of the mind, where our married couple of intuition and thinking are having a mad love affair and never have lost their honeymoon passion. We may show you a blank death stare face, but we have a massive fireworks display going on inside. There are no limits to what you can do inside your head. You can go past the speedo light and never look back. You can climb the mountains of the moon or walk on the surface of the sun. As an INTJ, you may very well calculate out every one of the variables so that you know exactly what you are facing as you encounter these mental experiences. Life is amazing when your intuition and your thinking are taking a walk on the wild side. Oh yeah, life is good as an INTJ when you unleash the power of your mind. This discussion has been hopelessly inadequate, I admit it. I have only hit the high points here, and that leaves a great deal of material to cover on the INTJ personality type in the future videos. On the upside, that leaves room for anticipation. However, in my next video, I will tackle another of the personality types and see how different we all can be on the inside and how those differences project themselves to the outside world. Thanks for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it, please hit like. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. I'll see you next time.